Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining for another Veza Talks episode. As always, I am your host, Colin, Chief Marketing Officer at the Veza Agency Network. And I'm very excited today to be joined by Curtis, who is the CEO of Whalesync, also leading the development of a really interesting tool called Scratch, which I am excited and I know he's excited to talk to you about today. But of course, the main thing that we love to have on this podcast is interesting people building interesting things and solving problems. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Curtis, to give a quick intro on yourself, your role, what you do day to day, any fun hobbies you want to share.
Ooh, well, thanks, Colin. Yeah, as you mentioned, CEO of Whalesync, we are a product that lets you synchronize data between your SaaS applications. So it might be you might want an Airtable to Webflow sync so that you can manage your CMS from a spreadsheet. You might want to author content in Notion and sync that to your website. Or you might be on an operations team and want to sync your CRM to a tool like Airtable, Notion, Supabase, even Google Sheets to save some seats and also make it easier to work with all your data. So yeah, we went through YC a summer 2021 during COVID, which was a lot of fun because it was
I can
all remote.
imagine.
Yeah, it was a very different experience. Especially now that they're all back in person and the whole remote thing was a interesting. They would call it an interesting experiment. We loved it. We've been all remote since the beginning, so we're still all remote. As you know, we're based here out of the Tampa Bay area. So and but a lot of my team is over on the West Coast and Washington and Vancouver and Victoria, Canada. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Very cool. Yeah, I think probably full disclosure, even though we're recording this podcast remotely, I am also based in the Tampa Bay area. And that's how Curtis and I met, basically through Webflow local meetups. In another life, I was a agency founder before transitioning into my role here at Van. I was founder of Belt Creative. And I was actually really excited when I first met you because I was already using your product at the time. As a Webflow agency, we had a client and they had the most complex use case systems that we'd run into at the time. They basically had a massive Airtable database that they wanted to be able to sync into their Webflow instance. They essentially were kind of like a Zapier alternative. They were basically like a data connector software, and they wanted to be able to list out all of their connectors. They wanted to have pages on their website detailing what all the connectors to their software were, and they wanted to procedurally create like software A, software B, how to connect the two pages. And as we were digging into Webflow to do this, we were like, oh yeah, no problem. We can generate like the CMS pages, no problem. But getting the data from Airtable, getting it to sync inside Webflow. So when they changed one inside of the other, we were trying to build something custom and it was an absolute nightmare. So finding a tool that actually just did this for us automatically was kind of life changing at the time. And then to my surprise, I met you, Curtis, at a Webflow meetup, and found out that you live like 10 minutes from my house. So that was super cool.
Yeah, that's a super common use case, actually. We still have a bunch of customers that do that sort of programmatic SEO use case where I think Zapier actually was the company that really championed it early on because now I think they literally have like 3,000 or more connectors. And, back a little bit earlier in the days of SEO, you could get a lot of cheap long tail web traffic by just having a perfect landing page that's like connect pipe drive to MailChimp, right?
Right.
And they were like, we really need to generate all the possible combinations of A to B landing pages. And so they built their own custom tooling inside the company back then. But then when people started using things like Airtable uh, to connect their data to Webflow and get it in, that was actually how we discovered the problem. When we first started the company, which is called Whale Form, technically, we were building a authenticated form builder that we imagined could grow into kind of a no-code app builder, and we were interviewing automation consultants, right, that were using a lot of these no-code tools and trying to test out product market fit, saying like, okay, we have this little MVP, we have this what was essentially a prototype. Like, is this what you want? Is this going to solve your problem? And we really weren't seeing a whole lot of differentiation between what we were building and the other companies that were already kind of taking over that space, like Stacker and Softer, and Bubble, of course, and so we were trying to keep an open mind and say like, okay, well, what other problems do you have? Like show us your setup, show us the things that you're trying to do, right? And so one thing that came up pretty frequently was, well, I'm connecting Airtable to Webflow, and we're doing it with Zapier. And so we would say, okay, can you dive into what you're setting up in Zapier? And they had, all these workflow automations set up in there, and, they dove into them and, went into all the complexity and all the detail. And we kind of recognized, this, you're just trying to get the data from Airtable and import it into Webflow on a regular basis. And if you're really fancy, you're trying to do the opposite too. You're trying to also bring data from Webflow back into Airtable. And this is a lot of setup to do that. How long did this take? And they would say, oh, like 2 or 3 days, and it's really fragile. And whenever it breaks, it's kind of a nightmare to debug and, go fix. And
Yeah.
my first job out of college was actually on the Microsoft OneDrive team. And so it was working on the desktop app where it was all about syncing files between computers and, between OneDrive in the cloud. It was called SkyDrive at that time. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, seeing what people were doing in Zapier, I was like, this is a data syncing problem. This shouldn't be a workflow automation problem. That doesn't really fit in this case. So
Right.
yeah, we decided to pivot to Whalesync, and the rest is history.
I think it's really interesting because it feels weird to say back in the day because this was like, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago at this point. But it really was extremely difficult at the time. I remember when I was like investigating solutions to find something that did true two-way data sync. Because like you said, it was a lot of like workflows. You could update something in here and then use a connector tool to push the data somewhere else. What got really challenging when we were trying to figure things out was, okay, but what if we want to update something in Webflow or this other tool, and then we want the data pushed back? That getting that like true two-way sync was a like really unique problem at the time, which thankfully, like I think your software was and is like a really fantastic solution for that, especially from a low to no code perspective. You can set it up and it maintains itself and it's substantially less fragile. But I'm curious, like when you were kind of exploring the options and figuring out how to do this, like what were some of the limitations or the areas that you kind of found it really difficult to build something that was like I really didn't find a lot of like true competitors that weren't like enterprise level.
Mm. Yeah, some of the difficulties of building Whalesync and connecting different services, we were surprised by, I guess we shouldn't have been surprised by the capabilities of APIs and, what some services enable and what some services don't. And so I would say, for example, Airtable is actually a pretty good API in terms of what it supports, and it's pretty straightforward. You get records out, you can save records back. It does what it says it's going to do. It's not really crazy. Whereas we've dealt with some other APIs, especially CRMs, for example, that just have kind of the craziest data models and ways to get data in and out. And it's like really not non-trivial trying to figure out, okay, how do we make this API work with data syncing? It just, at least auto magic data syncing, right? I think that one of the advantages that Zapier has is that they don't do much magic on top of the raw API endpoints. So if the raw API endpoint says, I do this weird thing, then Zapier has an action that pretty much directly maps to that and says, okay, so do you want to do this weird thing? And you might or you might not, right? It might not be what you're looking for. You're like, I just want to save this record. Like, what are you talking about? Not to say that they don't smooth that over at all, but I think in our case, we had a particular model that we were building of saying like, no, we don't want users to have to think about the messy details about how data is getting in and out of the system. We just want to present an interface, a model where they connect that system to another system and then hit go, and then it starts just keeping the data in sync between them. So yeah, API limitations has been a big one.
That makes a lot of sense. I think things also get a little more complicated when you're introducing the human element into things because that's where stuff often breaks. So you can you mentioned like that a lot of workflows were fragile, and that was something that us, especially as an agency building this out for our clients, we're really nervous about is like, okay, what happens when it breaks? What happens if the person on our team who built this out originally like leaves the company and then 2 years down the line the client comes back to us and they're like, hey, everything's broken and our SEO is tanking because all of the pages got completely overwritten. There's so many like things that could potentially go wrong, especially on the human side, because at the end of the day, like if you're keeping data in sync between your systems, there's a person who's updating things on one side or over here, or now AI agents, which we'll get to in a second, but at least like just limiting it to people. Like what are some of the things that you learned around how people actually use their data and their expectations in how they want to keep things in sync between different tools that maybe don't have native connectors to each other?
I mean, yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that we've found in general, I would say, is that uh, data is usually pretty messy when people want to start on this sort of a project. Like they may not actually have good visibility into what is in their sources of truth and what will actually work well and what won't. Even in something as visible as Airtable, when someone comes to Whalesync, it might be pretty messy, right? It might either be incomplete, or they have a bunch of broken formulas, or they have a lot of duplicate records or empty records, or all kinds of things, where the step one is often, okay, let's take a look at your data and let's get it into good shape to actually start syncing, because you might just want to jump to the end and say, I just want this perfectly working system where everything is in sync and you know my team is happy and I'm happy and all of our tools are happy. But usually there's some prep work to do to actually get there. Yeah.
Yep, can definitely can empathize there, especially, I mean, frankly, even our own data, like running an agency where like at the peak about creative just being its own standalone entity, we had 10 employees, but you get those 10 employees into HubSpot, and then you've got like 5 of us working in Webflow, and the way that I think about how to set up data structure is different than what somebody else thinks. And then you've got like people on the sales team who are just like entering data and they just want to get through it as quickly as possible so they can track their deals so they can get back to actually closing things. So they're not paying attention to making sure they figure out like all of these things on the contact record have to be filled out so that they relate to all these things on the company record. It's tedious work, right? And I think a lot of these tools now are building in like validators or automation so that you can make it so that you don't have to put in as much. But I think that's probably a helpful segue to what you and I were talking about when you were telling me about Scratch. I would love to kind of hear about that because I think the introduction of LLMs, tools like Claude, ChatGPT, anti gravity, being able to work with your data at scale, analyze these gaps, fix them. That's all extremely promising. But we also know that these LLMs are not perfect and they don't know everything that we know. And if they are working off of messy source data, odds are the outputs are also going to be messy too. So I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that problem today and kind of the solutions that you're exploring with Whalesync, with Scratch. Would love to kind of know like what about the current moment is maybe solving that problem or introducing new problems.
Yeah. I it's so funny because all these AI agents are obviously getting so good, and I think that that's also increasing the appetite of what teams want to do with their data and how they want to optimize their workflows. And everyone's asking the question, okay, so what, like, now that we all have this brilliant personal assistant, called Claude or Codex or whatever, how can AI help us do our work individually, and then how can it be integrated in the processes that our company is trying to do? in order to, grow business or cut costs or whatever. And so everyone's hooking up. Let's just say Claude for the sake of the rest of the conversation, because I think a lot of people are on Claude Cowork, Claude Code, and so a lot of people are hooking up Claude via MCP to their sources of truth, right? So to like HubSpot, their CRM, their website, their e-commerce, billing, customer support, email, of course, and now it can make a lot of edits very quickly. And so it's like, okay, what sorts of tools do we need in order for this to actually be effective? And so back to the messy data bit, often we find that, if you really want AI to efficiently have the right context to your business, then it has to have a good starting set of data. But then you can't, well, you can, but the risk of just asking AI, hey, like, go look at my data and fix all of it is you're kind of flying blind, right? You're just trusting whatever it's going to do. It just has a text box, like a chat box, and you're just chatting with Claude. And then it's like, well, do you want me to generate a CSV of what I'm going to do? And you say, okay, sure. But you still don't really know what it's going to do, right? You don't have this like overlay of, okay, well, what is the data right now? And then what is the after state? And have a really good visual.
Right.
And we hit this over the years in working with some of our customer data when some customers would come to us. Sometimes the unfortunate thing about data syncing is that when used imperfectly, you can get yourself into kind of a mess. You can get a lot of duplicates. There's all sorts of things that can happen. So we've had customers come to us and say, hey, like, I think we're in this bad state. Like, can you help us? Like, please. And
Yeah.
so like, you're data people, right? Data. What do we do? And so pre AI, we would build custom Python scripts and generate CSVs, right? With like before, after columns to kind of carefully check, uh, okay, what changes are we going to make for some sort of data cleanup, right? Like
Right.
merging a bunch of records or doing a migration or something like that. But, now it's so much easier with AI, but you still don't have the visibility, but unlike in the past when you yourself wrote all the scripts and you theoretically knew exactly what it was going to do, now you're not even writing the script, so you don't even know what it's going to do. You're just kind of hoping that it does the right thing. So yeah, that was one of the reasons why we started building Scratch, which is kind of like a data studio for your SaaS apps. So you can hook up Scratch to your website like Webflow, HubSpot, Notion, Airtable, Intercom, Stripe, Shopify, right? Whatever you have. And then you can work with AI on your data. And let's say you first want to do a cleanup because it's a mess. Then you get a full visual tool that basically says, okay, here's all the edits that it wants to make. Do these look good or do these not look good with all the appropriate context around it? So you get that full visual overlay. And so we were really kind of building a tool for ourselves first, but then, you know, kind of placing a bet that I bet a lot of other people are going to need this as well, especially as AI usage goes up. It just serves as a safety net for all the edits that AI wants to make.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. It's interesting because I think as tooling adoption, specifically things like Claude, we'll just go with Claude for now, but insert whatever like AI tool you're using of choice. But Claude is probably the one that's getting the most traction right now. As more people are using it, I'm seeing really interesting applications of it, and even within my own team with clients and stuff, I'm seeing so many things go wrong. And that is frequently one of the top things that I'm asked about is like, hey, like leaving aside like search and blah, 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 just working with my own data, the things that I need to be able to track and report on when I'm giving Claude permission to start editing things, not just read things, like reading things, whatever, pulls in the information, hallucinates something, you get a faulty report, not the end of the world. But when you're actually editing your source of truth, that becomes a really scary data governance situation because, like you said, these tools move so fast. You fire a single prompt and it could update tens of thousands of records. And depending on what you have in place, you may be able to revert that data. You might not. It might delete things permanently. It might not. It's so scary to have essentially like that tool available, like something that we haven't really had up until this point. And it's also meaning that there's not really a lot of guardrails in place. So if you know what you're doing, totally fine. You're going to like rock it. I've been doing lots of really cool stuff with Claude. But the moment I start like wanting to share this with people, I'm like, oh no, there's so many things that could go wrong. I have to like look at every single like permission thing, make sure that there's like a way to back up before I release the keys to the kingdom. And we've got 50 people working on the same database. So I'm curious, how are you thinking that a tool like Scratch might help with visibility, data governance, safety, being able to basically protect people's data even while they're trying to adopt these tools to be able to make these changes and speed up their workflows?
It's funny because I was chatting with a friend the other day, and they said, the phrase that 80% of drivers are above average. I feel like people have the same sort of feeling when they're using MCP and AI tools to edit the sources of truth, where they're not that worried about themselves making mistakes, but they're more worried about the rest of their team making mistakes, especially if you're kind of in charge of making sure that the data doesn't get messed up. Like if you're the Salesforce admin for your team, right, then you're kind of on the hook for the integrity of the data in that system. And so you have to decide, okay, like how are we going to make sure that, one rogue agent after one bad prompt doesn't just like wipe out our deal pipeline. Like what do we how do we guard against that? And so in chatting with customers about Scratch, one of the things that we're discovering that might have more potential is actually the recovery aspect of it rather than the review everything before you publish to the source of truth aspect. So one of the cool things that we did early on is we built Scratch so that everything runs on your local computer, right? And so the easiest way for us to do that was to pull data out of these sources of truth via the APIs and save that data as raw, like text files, literally JSON files. And so but how do you then visualize differences in text files? Well, like we're a team of engineers. And so the way that we do this all the time with source code is with a version control system like Git. So we actually decided to build Scratch using Git and text files on the back end to track all versions of how data is changing over time. And one of the unexpected niceties that comes out of that is that if Scratch is routinely pulling data and saving it into Git, then it serves as full version control on HubSpot, on Salesforce, on Shopify, wherever these sources of truth are. And so even if someone isn't using Scratch to carefully review all the changes before they hit publish, oh my goodness, right? If they're just using an MCP server and kind of YOLOing, it's all good. I'm a better than average driver, and then hitting save, and then it wipes out, your deal pipeline. If it's hooked up to Scratch, then we already have all the information to selectively undo all of those changes. That's one thing that we're exploring kind of building out more. We've so far, most of the product team has been focused on the pre-publish experience, not the undo button, oops experience of whether it was in Scratch or outside of Scratch. So, but I think the need for that is just going to go up by like 10x, 100x, as people are just hooking up AI to all their sources of truth. I mean, you've already seen it in the sort of software engineering world where people hook up AI agents to production, and then what was it, Pocket OS, where suddenly like AI decided to delete the production database and like what it thought was the only backups, and then it took like 5 days to find some like you know backup thankfully somewhere else to restore
Right.
from. But that could have very easily been a situation where there was no backup. and
All
it
right.
was just
I mean,
gone.
not to mention like the revenue lost, the customer confidence that's lost like through all of
Yeah,
that. Like there's a real like business cost to when things go wrong. So it's great to think like, oh great, we can just have the dev team hook up all the data, we can knock out all these bugs, blah 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 blah, and we can get all this stuff done in 2 weeks that was going to take us like a year before on a roadmap. But then when things go wrong, sometimes the damage can be really, really, really bad.
absolutely. Yeah. I feel like engineers have really been on the cutting edge of all the, adopting all the AI tools and kind of pushing them to the limits. And the rest of the, operator and kind of, business professional community is now starting to onboard to a lot of the more powerful tools. And this is going to be a really interesting couple of months to see, like, all the news stories that come out of this time where everybody's hooking up Claude desktop or Claude code to Salesforce, to everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, MCP.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
mean we're seeing that in our own organization. Like when we first set up our like Claude team account, it was five of us. There was five people, all with development experience, and we just wanted to be able to make some stuff. And that was totally cool for a while. But then all of a sudden it's like, okay, shoot, what if we were able to do all of our financial reporting by connecting our accounting software to Claude and pulling that data, and then we could do revenue projections and the stuff that previously was taking the finance team like 3 months to put together these detailed reports. We could all of a sudden do that like in a day, assuming that the data was clean. And then, what about the design team? They could audit a website and pull all the components and then bring that into Figma and they can start doing designs. All of these like interesting use cases across departments that I think kind of started with developer and engineering principles are starting to branch out. And it's the same way of thinking, but the applications are very different. And I think because of the newness of it and the unfamiliarity with how code works at a fundamental level, that's where things can get a little bit dicey. But I, we've talked, I think, quite a good amount about the things that can go wrong. But I think I'd love to talk about some of the things that can go right. Like when you are keeping your data in sync, when you do have clean data to work with, and you can actually bring that into a tool that you can have like a thought partner that can reason with your data and give you insights. What are you kind of seeing like the results from that once you have a good setup, once you have clean data to work with? How is that helping in your organization or with other clients that are using your tools? What are you seeing?
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of, online chatter right now about like setting up your company AI brain and, different schools of thought on how best to do that. But, whether that it's, some people are like full text files markdown Git repo kind of path where they're bringing everything into either GitHub or Obsidian and trying to structure their content that way. Or you might be more like Notion pilled and say, you know what, Notion is the like AI brain for our company. We just need to get everything into Notion, and then now Notion is really leaning into a full on Claude integration because I think everybody is realizing, oh wow, okay, like what are we doing? Like why are we trying to like compete with Anthropic on like building an amazing AI agent? Because once Claude has access to the right context, it can be an incredible help in literally anything that you're working on, right? So I've not yet found an area of our business where Claude is bad at helping out, basically being kind of a absolutely brilliant but error prone assistant. And usually it's directly correlated with like how successful it is correlated with what context you give it, right? And so if it has messy data or it has no data, then it's just kind of like a new hire employee that just walked in the door and has no idea, what you're doing and who your customers are or anything. But if you've structured your data such that it has access to everything that it needs, right? So that you know it can pull all the customer conversations that are relevant. It can pull all of the billing data or Stripe data. It can even pull things that are happening in production right now in like a very read-only mode, right? But the more that you just give it access to and carefully tell it, you can look here for this sort of information. I have not yet found a limit to what it can do. I wake up every day thinking, okay, where are we? Where are the gaps? Where have we not done that, and how do we fix that? Because it's just that good.
Yeah, I actually love that analogy of Claude being a new hire because I mean, if you think about it, you maybe like you bring in the smartest person in the world, the smartest consultant. If you just bring them into your company and they don't know who you are, they don't know your brand, your customers, any information, and you just start screaming at them to do stuff, they're gonna try, but it's probably not gonna be good than if you like have all of your SOPs and you give them access to your CRM and they have time to like think through and understand and process the data. The better data you give it in terms of like broader context, but also instructions, skills, processes, workflows, like things to go through. Like I found this extremely useful for my personal context is just to have like a set again of markdown files where plain text is king, baby. But being able to just say like, okay, here's what I do. Here's, how I like to communicate in Slack. Here's my different tone via email. Here's how I talk with people inside the company. It's a little more casual. If I'm like doing some external relation stuff, it might be a little bit more formal. The more I've been able to kind of give it examples and train it on things and update its context, the more it's easier for me to then just like pop into my Claude instance in the morning and just say like, I need to do this thing. I don't even know where to get started. It can pull everything and be like, here's three possible options. Which one should we run with today? It's usually like quite good.
I think that people who have been managers, at least or either now or in the past, have a huge advantage to using these new AI tools because, in my experience, it feels like working with new hires that you're having to train up and you have to kind of put that hat on and say, okay, I know you're brilliant and extremely capable. You just don't have um, the context you need yet to be, getting this done. So, like for example, I hate email. By the way, I just hate dealing with email. I'm very bad at email. There's the sort of getting things done methodology by David Allen that I had tried to adopt over the years, and I would have moments where I would say, "Okay, I'm really going to do it this time. I'm going to get to inbox zero and have everything sorted and always be on top of everything." But to me, it was just very, very, it was a lot of tedious drudgery of sorting through emails and, it's like, I don't know. So I would always kind of fall off the bandwagon. But, when these AI tools came out, and especially Claude, I said, okay, this has got to be it. Like, this has got to be the moment where I can finally do getting things done. Because if I can just point Claude at all of my email to do this, for me every single day, then in theory, I could spend like, 5, 10 minutes on my email once or twice a day and really, really be on top of it. But when I was setting that process up for myself, at first, it was not perfect. It would sort things in the wrong places and say, like, okay, yeah, this is spam. And I'm like, no, no, that's not spam. Or, oh, look at all these great investors you should be talking to. And I go, no, those are spam.
Yep.
This is like, and it just didn't know, right? And so it was like training a new employee on the team and then thinking, well, where is it storing all that training? Well, in a markdown file that it's reading at the beginning of every conversation to kind of reboot itself and get itself back up to speed and go, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. I know how to sort these emails, and here's all this essentially training data. And it sounds fancy, but really it's just like a document that you would hand to someone on your team and say, here's some guidelines, just use these, right? And so yeah, I found that people who have had to manage people in the past often are finding this a lot more natural than people who've never had any management experience and are having to learn this, like how to train somebody, a virtual sort of AI in real time. It's kind of interesting.
It's kind of funny that it kind of comes back to like good communication skills. Like if you have good communication skills with people, that is the same kind of communication skills you should have with your LLM. Like if you are able to communicate clear context, processes, rules, and guidelines, you're going to get much better outputs and a lot less like, no, that's completely wrong. We got to start from scratch here.
I I have been shocked watching people use AI and what they type into that text box.
But yeah,
Because yeah, I think about how I do it, and when I'm chatting with AI, I don't know why I've trained myself to almost be pedantic. Like when I'm doing the initial prompt, like, okay, thinking through, okay, what are all the things it might, what are all the different ways it might misinterpret what I'm about to say? And how can I be extremely clear? Right. So it's like, you one shot this prompt, whereas others I see chatting in Claude, like they'll they'll type in just something like a couple of words, and you know I look at that and I'm like, I'm a human and I don't even know what you mean, like
right?
what are you
What are you
asking the AI to do, because I don't even know. So I'll be really curious to see what comes out the other end of this. So it's just, yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to communication skills. It's weird.
one of my favorite things to do now is whenever I get like a message from my team and they say, "Hey, like the Claude skill that you gave me for doing this thing, it doesn't work." I'll say, "Oh, hey, can we just grab like a 5 minute screen share walkthrough, and I just want you to show me what you did." some some of the stuff that I see is absolutely wild, but it it does help me as an operator, because then I think through, oh, this is how people are actually going to use this thing. So let me update the skill file so that no matter how terrible the inputs are, like it'll be able to know, like, okay, if you genuinely don't know what they're asking, keep asking questions until you do. Like that's one that I've kind of started baking into all my skills, is like, when you do not have the full context to execute what you're being asked to do with this skill, ask and continue asking until you have all of the answers, because what people will put in is very like people. Some people assume they know exactly what's going on in their head when you send them something, and you don't.
It sounds a lot like defensively building a product, building a
Yeah,
skill that other people are going to use, because you don't know how they're going to use it or what data it's operating on. And so you kind of have to build all these safeguards, like, well, like, make sure that everything looks exactly like this, or, raise warnings, and, don't proceed if you're going to mess things up. Or, yeah, yeah, that it has a lot of parallels to product development.
that's interesting. I'm curious to know too, like, where do you think things are going now that essentially like Claude is kind of in the best case scenario. Let's be optimistic, and let's say like we get better tools in place to help us get cleaner data, provide better context, and these tools become more and more capable of automating a bunch of this busy work. And so our role starts shifting more and more into operators instead of being the ones who are executing the tasks. Where do you think that goes? Like, what kind of things do we become capable of? What like, especially like you are in the trenches building this stuff when it comes to data management. Where do we go from here?
I agree with some of the Y Combinator videos that they're putting out recently, in terms of how to be on the forefront of integrating AI into your business. And they launched a video recently talking about open loops versus closed loops, and how the best AI native companies are building closed loop systems, such that AI can continuously learn and improve the business on regular intervals, right? And so, customer feedback comes in. An AI agent should start working on that, saving the context, looking at previous product features that have launched or bugs that have been fixed, like, filing tickets, these sorts of systems that auto improve themselves. But I think the thing that we're still figuring out, that I think is going to be really critical, is, where there have to still be human in the loop points in this process. You're not just going to have this black box AI system that is just auto running while, you never have any interaction, with the business anymore, and you just go to the beach. It's So I think that it is cool to see how much people are automating with AI and generating with AI, but I think the thing that we're not talking about quite enough, you're either in like two camps right now. You're either in like AI everything and just like autopilot, or I hate AI, like, and I'm gonna post a bunch of content about why AI is slop and terrible. And I don't see enough in between those two that are trying to say, like, the challenge that we have to solve, whereas it's kind of the ultimate ending point, is figuring out where the humans are in the loop, so that everything that AI is working on doesn't just, regress to the mean, which is essentially AI slop, but also you're able to magnify your team's productivity by 10 or 100x effectively while still keeping the uniqueness and success of your business. So I think that that's kind of the critical thing.
I think that's a very like balanced and realistic take on things, and it's not one that I hear super often. I was absolutely fascinated because I recently like tuned in for the Google I/O conference where they were announcing like everything with Gemini, Android, blah blah, and there was like literally back to back segments where they demonstrated people using Gemini and Google Glasses to order lattes while they're on their morning walk, and oh yeah, we're gonna have like universal shopping carts. You can just tell Gemini to like shop from Walmart and Amazon and buy your stuff. And then immediately afterwards, like I am spacing his name at the moment, but there was one of the head executives from Google DeepMind went on stage and said, "We are going to remember this moment as being in the foothills of artificial general intelligence." It was right after all these like frankly like kind of basic consumery things, but like those seem to be like the different thoughts on where this could go. But I think I like your human in the loop framing. I think these tools are incredibly powerful, and I'm excited by a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing being built. I don't think we're going to have robots managing everything for us, and I think the times when people are trying to do that, I see some really bad outputs. But when I see people being thoughtful and using these tools as ways to accelerate their own good ideas and streamline the workflows, that's where I think we're seeing some really good results. That's just
It,
my take.
AI is just really the most sophisticated, brilliant autocomplete we have ever designed.
Yeah.
So if you have set up your business and if you're using AI in such a way that it can do what it's best at, being a really, really incredible autocomplete, then fantastic. If you think that autocomplete should run your business and you don't need to be part of that process anymore, then I don't think that that really leads to a very interesting place. Yeah. So I think
Awesome.
every business just starts ending up looking like they're all exactly the same at that point, and then that doesn't fit with how humanity works. So
At the end of the day, your customer is a person, not a robot. So if a person isn't required at some level to make something meaningful and useful to other people, are real people with money going to buy it?
exactly, exactly.
Hmm, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Curtis. It was wonderful chatting with you as always. If people want to check out Whalesync, if they want to check out Scratch, or if they want to connect with you, what's the best place for them to do so?
Feel free to email me always at curtis@whalesync.com. If you want to check out Whalesync, it's just whalesync.com. Very easy to sign up, get started. If you want to check out Scratch, it's scratch.md, playing on the markdown file extension. Although, fun fact, it's the domain for Moldova. But
They're probably saying a whole bunch of registrations for that, and I'm
they
like, oh, that's weird.
it's surprisingly, you can't, at least when we did it last year, you can't register it on something like GoDaddy. You have to go to this like, special Moldova registration site.
It's probably a great revenue driver for their government.
Yeah, they're probably like, why is everyone suddenly registering domain names with us? This is crazy. It's like 100x over the past year. So, yeah. Yep.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Cool. Cool. Thanks, Colin.